Hi, I'm Barbara Harberger, and I curated this show jointly for both InLiquid and Stanek Gallery. I have a master's degree in fine arts from the Art Institute of Chicago. I've been working as an independent art advisor since 2004. InLiquid is a nonprofit organization for the arts. It was started about 16 years ago. Rachel Zimmerman, who runs that program, is always looking for opportunities for her artists to display their work. I had been here at Stanek Gallery maybe January or February, and Catherine Stanek explained to me their programming. Their plan was that they would curate 2 shows a year, and the other shows would be curated by independent curators. So I told Rachel about it. This would be a wonderful opportunity for her artists to have an exhibit in a real gallery setting like this. Rachel turned to me and said, "Barbara, will you curate it for me?" So one of the things InLiquid has is a website with hundreds and hundreds of artists who are members of that organization. I went through every one of those portfolios to look at what started to speak to me. I had a collection of screenshots and started emailing people and doing studio visits, and as I spoke to the different artists, what became very common was the influence and inspiration that they got from landscape. In the end, I included landscape and natural forms because some of the sculptural elements are more figuratively based, even though they're also abstract. I just love the way the whole thing came together. It's really amazing. I had everything laid out on a plan, but I had no idea how it would really look on the wall until we actually got everything up this week. So I'm very pleased.
I guess with that number of artists on the InLiquid site, you could have probably curated a dozen of these shows.
Exactly. Yes, even more than a dozen. Yeah.
My name is Michelle Kishta, and I went to the University of Arts for painting and drawing undergrad and for my MFA in painting.
I'm greatly influenced by the graphic quality of Japanese prints and also the colors of nature. I think a lot of people typically think of browns and tans and these kinds of colors, but I'm dealing with the colors that people don't ordinarily associate with nature. Some of the colors, the bright green, that's like a brand new leaf, or hot pinks, sometimes the flowers. Nature is actually much more interesting than you would imagine in terms of color. I think a lot of what we perceive as color is dictated by the consumer culture. Interior designers, Pantone telling us these are the new colors of the season. And that's a lot of the reason why we think of color the way that we do. If you take a look at the wood grain of my panels, it resembles the water, but it's also a measure of the amount of water that's taken in by the tree in any given year. So it's actually a kind of map of the landscape. The landscape is inherent in the piece. I flip-flop between canvas and panel. I think that the canvas pieces are really more about the layers and the kinds of layering in nature and looking through atmosphere, and it was a lot harder than when I was working with the wood panels because I had to build up a paint history.
Hello, I'm Justin Rubik. I went to school at University of the Arts.
I make mixed media works. Here we have lithography, sequins, graphite. I do contact paper. Basically a variety of materials that add up to pictures that are generally drawn from nature or cityscapes. Really interested in unreliable viewing experiences. So a lot of times I try to use materials to combine them in ways that are confusing at times, where they relate to maybe something you know, something that's identifiable, and then they break out into abstract forms. Sometimes it gets really simple, like with these lithographs here, just basic forms created out of stripes. And then other times they get really complex, like with these sequence pieces that are based on actual sites within the city, but I try to confuse what it is you're looking at. So when you look at it, you see buildings, but then it breaks down into all these little miniature compositions, and the form becomes a cascade of individual parts. I have a strong idea of where I'm going, but sometimes I discover things along the way that I feel like is maybe more exciting than what I had envisioned. So I'll create what I'm really after on the one hand, and then maybe create something else.
My name is Wan Choi. I went to Syracuse University, New York.
I'm originally from South Korea.
And when did you move here?
1981. It's a pretty long time. My sculptures are mostly made of metal. Depending on the idea, I appropriate the material. So when it fits better with stone, I use stone. I meditate on 5 elements of nature. Natural element, water, air, fire, earth, space. It just inspires me some spiritual meanings. And I like the idea of combining human body with nature. So, for instance, like the fairy shower, her hair becomes a waterfall and her arm becomes clouds.
Couple singing age-old love song.
Beautiful sculptures.
Thank you very much.
My name is Mallory Johnson. I went to school at Moore College of Art for my undergrad, and I did my master's studies at Vermont College of Art in Montpelier. These are a series of paper collages I made using handmade plant-dyed extracts. I'm boiling down different types of plants to create dyes and then dyeing paper strips and weaving the paper back together.
They're very geometrical. What are your influences?
I'm thinking about weaving and basketry weaving, also understanding nature through geometry, natural processes, things like that.
You have a beautiful color sense. They're kind of unusual colors. How did you come up with?
Well, when I was choosing plants to create the dyes from, I really wanted to develop a sort of painter's palette. And so I worked with a number of different plants that would give me pretty much a full range. So I used indigo, fermented from indigo plant leaves. I used weld, which is a yellow flower, which gives a really soft, cool yellow. And then I used quebracho, which is a really deep red wood, and logwood, which is a more purple tone. And between those 4 colors, I was pretty much able to get a full range.
How long have you been in liquid?
Since about 2008, so that's 8 years now.
Beautiful show.
Beautiful show, definitely. A lot of good artists in here.
Marjorie Ander. I did my undergraduate degree at Carnegie Mellon University, and I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for graduate school.
I've been making work out of cosmetic sponges for about 3 years now. So for me, that's the process of gluing them to canvas, and then I use pastel pigment and gouache and ink to dress them, so to speak, before I install them. The installing process, that's the most important, in that they're made flat, and when I go to a site, I stuff them on location so they evolve and undulate and kind of become voluptuous. And for me, it's really the merging or the intersection of Mother Nature and the urban landscape.
I asked her if any given piece was always installed the same way.
They never look the same, and for me, that's the beauty of them. In a way, I see them as moving drawings. A writer wrote The Calm and the Frenzy. These pieces, there's kind of a frenetic activity that goes on, especially when we're installing. And once the work gets up, you actually have this sense of calm.
I went to Mass Art and Brandeis University.
I make work about the city, so I walk around and I take the train and I draw and doodle.
Do you live in Philadelphia?
Yes, I do. And I make collages with printmaking, with screen printing and etching and monoprints. I also make large-scale work using screen printing and painting, a combination of media. I use markers, pencil, ink, paint, screen printing ink, etching ink. I use a lot of different media.
Your dress seems to fit the theme of the show.
Oh yeah, it's colorful, right? Yeah.
And geometric.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
name is Rebecca Jacoby, and I went to Pratt Institute.
My work is mixed media on canvas and paper. On canvas, I work with oil, paint, acrylic paint, collage, pastel, a whole lot of different media. Put them all on the canvas, very abstract and colorful, very textural. On paper, I'm doing much the same kind of work. Right now, mainly work with pen, marker, and liquid paper. I'm working specifically on Bristol. I have a range in scale, and my work is really based on the natural world, specifically the rocks and stones and pebbles of New England. The work is also about the meditative quality of drawing and collaging and repetitive design. The shapes that I make are very naturalistic, but I add very saturated colors and make them into a fantastical landscape. Everybody can look at them and see something new. So some people can see figures, some people can see topographical maps.
One of the surprises in your work is they're pretty flat, and then all of a sudden out pops a three-dimensional object.
It's about creating depth in a real world that viewers can go into and come out of, and the surprise quality that you just spoke of is exactly what I would hope for. That creates that pop.
Hi, I'm Tom Miles. I now live in Philadelphia. I went to Boston University for my MFA and University of the Arts for my undergraduate. A lot of the work I've been doing recently is stuff that's rather old. Some of the pieces date back to the 70s that I was never able to finish, and I'm working on them now. I've started back into my sculpture career after being in business for a number of years, and I'm very excited about what I'm doing. I got so many projects right now, I can't even get started on most of them. For years I've taught anatomy and structure of the figure, and I do wonderful little figurative pieces, body portraits of models, but I decided to become more deconstructive about the figure and looking inside the figure. So when I started doing the abstract pieces, I wanted to explode the figure and then really explore what was going on. People don't realize it. That piece was never modeled. It's been carved and then cast in stainless steel. The Kabuki series I'm working on, pieces of aluminum triangles that have been extruded, and it's just another way of making form.
This Jesus sculpture is really beautiful and extremely smooth. What's it made out of?
Plaster over foam.
And do you paint them after they're fabricated?
Yes, I've learned how to use a spray gun really well.
And why are you making Jesus?
Because it's been on my mind for 40 years and I had to finish it.
Catholic guilt?
No, actually I was a Presbyterian minister at the time, and so what goes around comes around. Baggage and unfinished business has to be complete.
Going from being a minister to an artist, which is the more spiritual quest?
The artist.
As if to prove his point, Tom's fellow sculptor Juan Choi gave me the backstory about one of her striking sculptures.
I called it a waves of angel because I think our mind is like an ocean wave. There are sometimes it's calm and sometimes it's tumultuous. Out of that comes out a very insightful moment of spiritual realization and enlightenment.
It's a beautiful piece.
Thank you.
Have you gone through those tumultuous times?
Oh, sure, I did. I went through all those.
How do you get out of it?
Well, sometimes it's just best to be quiet. Just let things be as they are and don't try to fight against it.
Thank you. That's good advice. Is your mother Mrs. InLiquid?
Yes.
Do you think she'll talk to me?
Sure.
Here's Mrs. InLiquid herself.
Rachel Zimmerman. So InLiquid is turning 17 on the 17th. I started in 1999, and the idea was to create a hub for visual artists in Philadelphia. You know, having grown up in Philadelphia, but moving to New York and working in New York galleries, realizing that you can show anywhere as long as people have access to you. And at the time, the web was really, really new. So it made sense to use the web as a vehicle, and we didn't want to sort of compete with galleries. We wanted to be a partner, but also give exposure to a whole range of artists that are doing great work in Philadelphia, but their work is not being shown. So after 17 years, surviving the Great Recession of 2009 and 10, we're back, but now we do a lot more hands-on programming. And we also have this really nice familial relationships with a lot of our artists. It's really, we've created a family. And so it's nice to be able to be that connector between the people interested in arts and the artists, and creating really dynamic programming that it becomes something more.
Your mother is a very smart woman.
Yeah, she is. She helps me do my homework and I haven't done that yet.
You better get started.
I will.